In this video, we're going to look at supporting your ideas, chapter 7. So for this chapter, we're going to look at the different types of support material that you can use when you're preparing your presentations in order to defend what you have to say and to support that you have valid, credible information. So the first type we'll discuss is personal testimony. So personal testimony is an individual story concerning their lived experience, which can be used to illustrate the existence of a particular event, or it offers testimony that provides an example to your point of view, which enhances your credibility. It can enhance your speech by conveying insight and emotion regarding the topic. Like we talked about in the last chapter, we talked about logos and pathos. So with personal testimony, you could bring in someone that's an expert to defend what you have to say. That would be logos. Or you could provide information that's a personal experience or story, which might have an emotional point of it. That would be pathos. In addition to that, that would all add to your credibility, which would be ethos. So we would practice the story to make sure that it makes the appropriate point at the time that you have. And then you also have lay testimony, which is testimony based on a witness's opinions or perceptions in a given case. So personal testimony would be someone's personal experience that you would utilize in your speech to defend and illustrate the information that you're providing. With that, you typically would do an interview. So interviews for expert testimony comes from a recognized authority who has conducted extensive research on an issue. Again, we go back to logos. Interviews give people the chance to expand on their published research, and they offer information in a different perspective, and sometimes it can offer it in a more specific perspective that you're needing for your presentation. So it can help make the specific point that you're trying to make. So when you do an interview, if you ever had that opportunity, like any sort of interaction with someone, you want to foster a rapport with that person. So it's a good idea to make some casual small talk before getting and diving right into the questions. Anytime you're interviewing someone, it's always important to be really prepared. So you want to have a clear idea of who the person is that you're talking to, what their expertise is in, what their level of expertise is, and then you want to have specific questions that you want to ask them in order to provide the information that you want. It's always helpful to someone that you're interviewing if you kind of are able to guide them throughout the process and you help them feel comfortable and that you show them that you're prepared and that you're in no way wanting to take or waste any of their time, and you have a very focused interview. So in the interview process, you'll have develop a positive rapport. You can take turns, allow them to finish what they're saying without interrupting them and wanting to move on, and give them the freedom to kind of talk about what they feel comfortable talking about. And then there may be times you need to redirect, but that always needs to be done after they've finished communicating what they want to say. After the interview, it's a good idea to review your notes for insight that substantiates the purpose. So additional resources are library resources. So in the library, you can find books, you can locate periodicals, which are resources where you can find different scholarly journal articles that have been published or periodicals in a magazine and newspaper, and you can say, okay, I want to find an article on this. So I can check periodicals, find what particular journal, what volume, what year, what season that article was published in a journal. And so you can get that information through periodicals. You also have full text databases found electronically. College libraries really provide a lot of good resources for students that they pay for to kind of help researching be a little easier for you. So you can find electronic databases that will tell you what's in your library, but then it also may have resources to outside sources. Internet resources is probably what most of you are going to jump to first, and I'm with you on that. It is definitely the easiest way to research. So when you research for your topic, you'll go to search engines. It's important to be specific as to the information that you want to find. So I would say, for example, and we'll talk about this in other chapters, when you begin your research, I think it's important that you know your topic, you know the 3 main points you want to cover in your topic, and not only that, you have brainstormed and stemmed off from each of those main points to have a clear understanding of the subpoints that you want to discuss in your presentation. And the purpose of that is, think about, for example, if you're giving an informative speech on financial aid, and if you Googled financial aid, you're going to find a ton of information, and a lot of it won't be helpful to you. But if you Google unsubsidized loans available to college students, that's going to narrow the information that you receive. If you say financial aid, ton of information, academic scholarships available to students in my area, that's going to narrow the information that you get. So when you begin your research, it's important that you have a good idea of where you want to go in your speech, and that's going to help you narrow your searches, and it's going to save you a ton of time. Look at websites maintained by individuals, organizations, companies, or governments. It's always important to consider where your resource is coming from. So it's a really good, important that you make sure that your resource is coming from, if it's an individual, it's an expert in a field, it's someone that has focused research in an area, or an organization, an educational institution, a company, a government. You do want to make sure it's not a random website by someone nobody has any idea where their expertise comes from. They've just decided to put a website on something, and you always want to make sure that valid source is a good, credible one. And then you also can look for government documents on the internet. So evaluate your information. Like we talked about earlier, narrow your support by evaluating the quality and credibility of each source. Wikipedia is not a valid source. It's not a credible source. We know with Wikipedia, you can find a lot of good information. You can find a lot of information, but we also know that it can be edited by anyone. So the validity and the credibility of the source is flawed when it has the ability for just anyone to go and make changes at will. So Wikipedia would not be a valid source. Always look at the credibility of the source you're talking about. So for instance, if you're giving an informative speech and you want to tell us about gun laws and you're pulling that information from the National Rifle Association, know that while it is a good source, does it have biased information? Possibly. So I think it's always a good idea to consider your source and consider what their biases would be. Check the source qualifications, the parity of their message with similar source. Compare, okay, this is what I'm finding from this source. Can I find that somewhere else, or is this the only source that says that? And always consider any bias that your source may have. And that's very important. Even when you're doing the persuasive speech, you want good, solid researched information supporting what you have to say. But what we also know is that anyone can develop a study and provide body of research to pretty much defend anything they want it to say. So when you bring in information from neutral sources, from unbiased sources, then that gives you more credibility in the research that you're using. So cite sources and avoid plagiarism. There's different styles for citing sources. For our class, we're going to use APA. So always consider the citation style that's assigned and format your citations to avoid plagiarism. And we know that plagiarism is the act of presenting someone else's work or ideas as your own. So it's important that when you are doing your research, if you are directly quoting a source, if you are providing information or data or statistics that comes from that source, that you cite where it came from. So instead of just saying 50% of Americans are plagued with this disorder, you would say the New York Times reports on May of 2021 that 50% of Americans are plagued with this disorder. So then you would explain where you got it from. So it's always important to do that. I will run your outlines through a plagiarism checker in the process of grading them. And so if it is found that you have plagiarized large parts of your speech, then that will definitely be a penalty to your grade. So it's very important that you use the information that you have, but you give the credit where it's due. If you're just pulling ideas from a source, you just cite it on your Works Cited page. That's the page following your outline. If you're directly quoting or pulling direct statistics or information, then you would quote them in the text of your outline, and you'll also cite that on your Works Cited page. You can find a lot of resources online to help you with APA format. In the sample outline that I provided for you, I used the Google Docs resource to make APA format, and it was super easy. The important thing is that as you're going through your presentation, your research, as you're going through your research, it's really helpful to begin building your Works Cited page at that time, because you're able to pull the websites from the article, and you have everything available for you right there, and start building that page as you go with your research. If you don't end up using a certain body of research, then you can take it off. But it definitely helps you to do that as you go. Okay, so there's more resources available in this module on this chapter on plagiarism to kind of give you some additional information on citing those sources if you would like additional support. You can also find extra links within our Canvas course to help you with citing within your speeches.